In the freezing February of 1968, 5,000 meters down in the Pacific, the Soviet nuclear submarine K-129 lay on the sea floor, carrying 3 1-megaton nuclear missiles, codebooks holding the Soviet Union's darkest secrets, and the bodies of 98 Soviet sailors. The Soviets searched for weeks and never found it. But 6 years later, the CIA came up with a crazy plan to steal the submarine from the bottom of the ocean, right under the Soviets' noses. In today's money, it would cost close to $5 billion. The plan had a name: Project Azorian. The world was living with the fear that the tension between the United States and the Soviet Union could turn into a nuclear catastrophe at any moment. K-129 quietly departed from the Rybachi naval base on the Kamchatka Peninsula. This massive Golf II-class diesel-electric submarine was moving into the depths of the Pacific Ocean with a crew of 98. Inside this submarine were 3 1-megaton nuclear missiles, and just one of them was 60 times more powerful than the bomb that leveled Hiroshima. Even a single one had enough power to destroy an entire metropolis in seconds. March 8, 1968, midnight. The signal cut out. The submarine sank into the dark waters of the Pacific. The Soviet Navy was in a panic. The nuclear missiles were lost somewhere on the ocean floor. This wasn't just a military disaster, it also meant an enormous security crisis. Immediately, 25 warships and 52 aircraft were sent to the area. Sonar systems were activated. Divers were put on standby. For weeks, every inch was scanned. Soviet engineers ran calculations. Possible zones were determined. The result was always the same: no trace. In the end, the Soviets gave up hope. Memorial ceremonies were held for the fallen sailors, and K-129 was now nothing more than a legend on the ocean floor. But the Pentagon wasn't going to let it go. The United States had a powerful technology no other country had: SOSUS, the Sound Surveillance System, one of the Cold War's most secret weapons, a massive network of hydrophones laid across the seafloor of the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Every submarine movement, every engine sound, every explosion was being recorded. And alongside it were ATAC's ultra-sensitive underwater listening stations, the Air Force Technical Applications Center. On March 8th, these systems recorded a violent explosion coming from the depths of the ocean. Analysts at the Pentagon were called into an emergency meeting. ATAC's recording equipment was 10 times more sensitive than SOS's, and those sensors pinpointed the location of the blast with near millimetric accuracy. Intelligence officers analyzed the data: 1,560 miles northwest of Hawaii. Depth: 5,000 meters. At that depth, the pressure is so extreme that a human body would be crushed like paper in seconds. Until then, no recovery operation had ever been able to reach that deep. This was the impossible zone. In Washington, a different calculation was being made. What if it wasn't impossible? If they could reach those missiles, those ciphers, those code books, the balance of the Cold War could change overnight. July 1968, the special mission submarine USS Halibut quietly slipped into the Pacific under Operation Sand Dollar. The crew didn't know the details of the mission. They were only told it was of vital importance. This was no ordinary submarine. Halibut was one of the Cold War's most advanced spy platforms, carrying remote-controlled camera systems built to go down into extreme depths. The special devices they called fish could dive 6 kilometers and take photographs using a strobe flash. There was only one problem. The ocean floor was enormous. It was like searching for a needle in a haystack. For months, they scanned the seabed. The crew, glued to their screens, watched endless plains of sand, volcanic rock, and deep-sea creatures. Hope was starting to run out. And then, something appeared on the screen. Metal. a shattered hull, a Soviet-built submarine. They had found K-129. The halibut crew pulled off something historic. They took exactly 23,000 photographs, every angle, every detail, fully documented. When CIA analysts studied the images, they couldn't believe their eyes. The missile casings were still in place. The code room was visible, and secret-laden documents were lying down there somewhere. The success was so great that President Lyndon B. Johnson personally awarded the crew a classified presidential commendation. No one would be able to speak of it for years. Finding it had been the easy part. The real work was only beginning now, raising it. In 1969, a critical decision was made in a secret White House meeting room. K-129 would be recovered, and the CIA would take the mission, because this operation could never appear in official records. The operation's real name would be Project Azorian. The name Jennifer, later used incorrectly by the press, was only a code name assigned to security procedures. A special projects group was created inside the CIA. They put the legendary John Parangos in charge, the man who would run the U-2 spy plane operations and the Corona reconnaissance satellites. Parangos was the man who got impossible missions done. This time, the challenge in front of him was something else entirely. In the meeting, Parangos summed up the job with a metaphor. It was like pulling a gold-filled car up from the street using a 1-inch steel cable from the top of the Empire State Building, without anyone noticing. And you couldn't damage the car, because the gold inside was so valuable that a single crack could ruin everything. In the first calculations, the chance of success was put at only 10%. The engineers were on the verge of losing their minds. When President Richard Nixon approved the operation, he set one critical condition. This operation must not begin before the summit I will hold with Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev. He didn't want a diplomatic crisis. If they were caught, the outcome could be catastrophic. A new war could break out. CIA engineers brainstormed for a solution. They would build a gigantic mechanical claw, one that could grip the wreck without tearing it apart and lift it. And they would need a special ship to lower that claw to the ocean floor, then haul it back up in secret. The problem was simple. No such ship existed. Nothing like it had ever been built anywhere in the world. But the CIA was going to do it. There was another problem. Building a massive ship out in the open. Soviet spy satellites, KGB agents, ports, shipyards, everywhere. Keeping it hidden would not be easy. So the CIA came up with a cunning plan. Howard Hughes, a mysterious billionaire, an aircraft builder, a Hollywood investor, a reclusive figure living far from the public eye. The perfect cover. Using Hughes's company, Summa Corporation, the CIA fed the public this story. Howard Hughes is building an experimental deep-sea mining ship to collect manganese nodules, those valuable minerals, from the ocean floor. This will be a new era in the history of mining. The story was crafted so carefully that even Hollywood actor Richard Anderson appeared in commercials describing this mining revolution. In the ads shown on television, Anderson smiled and said, "There are trillions of dollars worth of minerals on the ocean floor, and Hughes will reach that treasure." Wall Street analysts wrote investment reports. Scientists debated Hughes's vision in academic journals. Workers in the shipyard thought they were building a mining ship. CIA officials never met Hughes directly. Every line of communication ran through his 5-man ultra-loyal team, known as the Mormon Mafia. This team handled all Hughes's affairs, working in absolute silence.
And the world believed it. No one knew what was really being built. At a cost of more than $5 billion in today's money, the Hughes Glomar Explorer was constructed, a colossal ship 189 meters long. To the public, it looked like an ordinary mining vessel. The real magic was in the very belly of the ship, the moon pool, a hidden hangar embedded inside the vessel, invisible from the outside. Massive doors would open, the submarine would be brought inside, and the doors would close again. That way, even spy satellites overhead wouldn't be able to see what was happening inside. The ship was equipped with 16-cylinder diesel engines, each one as powerful as a locomotive. And the most critical, most revolutionary feature, the world's first true dynamic positioning system. Thanks to this system, the ship could hold steady with millimeter precision while lowering steel pipes 5 kilometers down, despite ocean currents and waves. It didn't drift at all. The giant claw's name was Clementine. On paper, the plan was perfect. June 20th, 1974, the Hughes Glomar Explorer left California. The press announced it as a mining test. On July 4th, ironically, on America's Independence Day, it reached the target area. But they weren't alone. The Soviet missile tracking ship Chazma and the massive ocean tug SB-1 began watching closely. Soviet helicopters flew threatening low passes over the ship, sometimes only a few meters above the deck.
CIA agents moved immediately. They filled the helipad with huge metal crates. If there was a raid, Soviet helicopters wouldn't even be able to land. Incinerators were kept ready to destroy classified documents. Everyone on the ship was armed. One wrong move, one shot fired, could mean war.
Inside the ship, down in the moon pool, the historic operation began in silence. 600 steel pipes were screwed together one by one. Clementine was lowered slowly, centimeter by centimeter. It took hours. It took days. Soviet ships were still patrolling nearby. At last, after 5,000 meters, the claw reached the ocean floor. The engineers watching the screen saw the wreck on the cameras. Clementine's arms opened, and it grabbed the wreck. The lift began. The engineers at the screens weren't even breathing. Everyone was silent. Every meter was a victory. Every centimeter was a historic moment. Soviet ships were still
circling around, completely unaware. The CIA was carrying out a historic theft right under their noses. The wreck began to rise from the seabed. 1,000 meters, 1,500 meters, 2,000 meters. The wreck had risen about 2,000 meters from the ocean floor. Halfway, they were very close to success. A horrible sound. The image on the screens shook. 2 of Clementine's arms snapped one after another. A structural weakness in the maranging steel, and the ocean floor being far harder than expected, most likely volcanic rock, ruined the plan. About 2/3 of the submarine, the critical 30-meter section, slipped free from the claw, like it was happening in slow motion, and 5,000 meters down, it fell back to the ocean floor. The parts that fell? The nuclear missiles, the code room, the main engines, the cipher machines. In other words, the most valuable, most critical section. Years of work, billions of dollars, the effort of hundreds of people, gone in a matter of seconds. All that remained was the submarine's bow section. When the recovered bow section was pulled into the moon pool, a horrifying truth emerged. Radiation alarms started sounding. One of the nuclear torpedoes inside the wreck had ruptured. The inside of the ship was contaminated with plutonium. Technical teams had to work wearing lead-lined protective suits. But what was more painful, they could only recover the bodies of 6 Soviet sailors. Viktor Lokov, Vladimir Kostyushko, Valentin Nosachev, and 3 comrades whose identities could not be determined. Their uniforms were still on them. September 4th, 1974, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, inside the secret hangar of an enemy ship, a historic moment took place. The CIA and the US Navy held a funeral ceremony with military honors for these 6 Soviet sailors. Metal coffins wrapped in the Soviet flag were prepared. The Soviet national anthem was played. CIA interpreter Jim Reeb read the prayers in Russian. American servicemen stood at attention. The 6 sailors were laid to rest in the deep waters of the Pacific, in their eternal sleep. Despite being enemies, sailors showed respect to sailors. The footage of this ceremony was returned to Russia only in 1992.
Soviet families finally learned that their loved ones had been sent off with honor.
The CIA had not given up. A second operation, under the name Project Matador, was being planned to recover the remaining parts. Everything was going smoothly. Ships were being prepared, teams were being trained. Until, on an ordinary night in Los Angeles, an ordinary burglary took place at Howard Hughes's office. The thieves blew open the safe and stole some documents. Under normal circumstances, it could have been an insignificant incident, but those documents revealed the secret connection between Hughes and the CIA, the payment records, the operational codes. February 1975. The Los Angeles Times broke it on the front page. The New York Times and the Washington Post followed. The media went wild. CIA stole a Soviet submarine using Howard Hughes's ship. Journalist Harriet Ann Philippi filed a request with the CIA under the Freedom of Information Act. The CIA was caught in a dilemma. If it denied it, it would be a lie. If it confirmed it, the operation would be over, and the second mission would become impossible. And so, a strategy that went down in history was born. We can neither confirm nor deny whether this information is true. That sentence entered legal literature as the Glomar response. Today, it is still used worldwide. Governments, companies, and intelligence organizations apply this strategy to protect classified information. One interesting detail: the CIA later returned the submarine's bell to Russia. Some intelligence experts asked, if they really recovered only the bow section, where did they get the bell? The bell was in the missile section. Maybe the code room was recovered too, but no one knows for sure. That detail is still disputed. So, was Project Azorian a success or a $5 billion fiasco? The nuclear missiles fell back to the ocean floor. The most critical ciphers and codebooks were never obtained. Most of the submarine is still lying 5,000 meters down, still guarding its secrets. But for the CIA, it was one of the greatest intelligence successes in history, because it proved one thing: the United States had the technology to pull the Soviets' deepest secrets quite literally from 5 kilometers down, right from under their noses. The message was clear: nothing is safe, no place is unreachable. That message kept the Kremlin constantly uneasy throughout the remaining years of the Cold War. Hughes Glomar Explorer? After sitting in port for a long time, she was sold to oil companies and converted into a drilling ship. In 2015, she was scrapped. Some of her parts are now displayed in museums. K-129? It is still 5,000 meters deep in the Pacific. 3 1-megaton nuclear missiles, Soviet cipher books, and countless secrets. Maybe it will stay there forever. What does this story teach us? That when human will and technology come together, there is no such thing as impossible. But it also reminds us how small we are in the face of nature, the immense power of the ocean. And that is exactly why Project Azorian remains one of the most fascinating, most audacious operations in history.